Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to go live briefly because I think maybe people may have misunderstood of what I've said about Jeff Epstein, and I just wanted to clarify exactly what I meant. And so Jeff Epstein, I had said, my story is different than the story that's out in the public media. My story goes back to my roommate working for Jeff Epstein. And yes, Roger Staubach, Navy Academy graduate here. So I am in Annapolis, where this whole thing started with the Navy nuclear submarine. And I'll tie this all back to Rickover and Bronfman, and how Bronfman gets involved in this, and then how Wexner and Columbus gets involved, and Battelle and the nuclear industry in general, and kind of moving the nuclear industry overseas to various countries all over the world. That's the plan. And it really starts with this nuclear Navy project that's in Ohio, that is in my hometown, Cleveland, Ohio, Euclid specifically, and then also Barberton, and then Wexner is also down in Columbus. And Wexner's key partner in, as far as the Ohio, the people who supply the Ohio mob the alcohol and then later drugs. And they decided to, when the nuclear opportunity came along, again, this is after Prohibition, so there's no money stream there, no smuggling premium there. They move it into drugs, but again, you can't put the drug money into a bank account. So what do? You launder it into energy. Before nuclear energy, you could launder it into oil and gas, and they still are laundering it into oil and gas. I don't want to say that they're not, but one of the better ways to do it is to move the money offshore. And then the second thing is to invest in nuclear energy because it's a monopoly. Those are the two things. So, so Wexner and Bronfman, and Wendy Webb has a great article about this out there. Excuse me, I've been walking all over Annapolis and going to different places, asking a lot of questions. I met a person that was involved with Mussolini, and his father was working with trying to get the nuclear Nazis out of Italy with Mussolini. So I know I'm in the right spot, so I'm trying to move around. If we could only prove that all of those trips that Bob Mueller's dad made between Naples and Palermo were nuclear Nazi shuttle trips. Again, James Angleton runs that section. It was called Project Ivy. And he's very close with the key people that got the Nazis out. And again, James Angleton's dad is a Knight of Malta. James Angleton's a Knight of Malta. They were very close and tight in with the Rome and the Vatican Bank to get these guys to be able to bribe their way out and get diplomatic passports. And if you just follow that example, you have a whole bunch of people that are very technical in the space industry, in the weapons industry, in the aeronautics industry, nuclear industry. Of course, you would put your money, if you have this diaspora all over South America or wherever, of course you would put your money as you made it, and you infiltrated into the different markets, into things that you were the best at. Of course, you would infiltrate into universities that were the leading universities and all these things. Of course, you would have a JSON group, which was the July, August, September, October, November science group that just recently was shut down here. The NNSA was trying to keep it alive, but it was basically a way of bringing all the scientists together to be able to collect notes, and like in a recording studio type environment, where you could basically get all the intelligence. And of course, you would have a MITRE that would take over for JSON, where you'd have a Nellie Orr and a Bruce Orr. Of course, you would have all the federally funded research and development centers with spies to record everything they do. Of course, you'd have SAIC, which is CIA's, if you spell backwards, managing a lot of these places as well. Of course, you'd have a private DARPA. You'd have companies that infiltrated using headliner generals that would infiltrate into different DARPA organizations. That's free money. That's free research. And then you can do joint ventures overseas. So specifically with Jeff Epstein and Donald Barr, people are saying, well, did Jeff Epstein work for Saudi intelligence because he has this Saudi passport? And I look at it and say, well, did this plane fly to Saudi Arabia? No, this plane didn't just fly to Saudi Arabia. It flies all over the place, depending on where the investments were going to be for Les Wexner. I mean, that's the bottom line. The great thing about technology is you can keep infiltrating it as different countries come online, and it's an evergreen technology. You can just keep selling it over and over. And then it also is evergreen in the terms you can provide fuel rods. And this is the business that basically Donald Barr is a part of, and also Bob Mueller. And I believe Donald Barr was an OSS officer. We know he was at Columbia, and he's doing this with the students there. And we know that probably Robert Swan Mueller, OSS officer, in, again, doing the shuttling of people that were these nuclear Nazis that were coming in and out of Italy, again, with James Angleton, again, Project Ivy, if you haven't seen that. And that was Angleton's job. Again, if you're Alan Dulles, your best friend is Angleton, you were putting all this energy and effort into Germany, and then Germany loses the war, your investment goes away unless you can get your right-hand man, who speaks perfect Italian, to bring these people out. And I believe Bob Mueller's father was the guy who was doing these trips and bringing these scientists out. And again, you got to get them to go somewhere. So is Jeff Epstein a Saudi intel person? Is Jeff Epstein flying Iranian students? Is Jeff Epstein flying Pakistani students, that become spies? Is he flying Brazilian students at one point? Is he flying Colombian or Argentinian students? Is he flying Uruguayan students? Answer is going to be yes to all the above, because those are all customers. Just look at where Joe Colvin talks about it. He says there's 140 some nuclear reactors in the United States. Okay, that's where Jeff's going to fly. And there's about 450 around the world. That's where Jeff's going to fly. Again, use the same infiltration technique that the Cambridge Five used over and over, which is written in Lakova's book. They say exactly how they use these Russian students to come in. They use a class of about 72. They try to keep 3 or 4 students per university so that there's some duplication. MIT and some of the other key universities had 12. And so forth. And you want to have these students not just have a sex party on the weekend. It's good to get the introduction that way, but you want these students to get scholarships, and you want these students to be assistants, these young, it can be either men or women. You want them to become the outstanding assistant to the person who's, let's say, doing the nuclear fuel rods at Oak Ridge National Laboratories. If you have a Bruce Orr's father who's working on 3 new metals, hafnium, beryllium, and zirconium oxide alloys for this embrittlement problem, you want to make sure that you put your person in there. You want to put, I'm not saying it's Louise Page Morris, but you want a Louise Page Morris to go in there and marry that person so that, or at least be the assistant so that you get all the stuff. And you want it over a long period of time. So now I'm gonna give you a factoid, and that's what I call kind of a theory. It's a theory. It's a kind of a theory of how things work. But then you start seeing all this evidence of Donald Barr and so forth that supports the theory. If you look at the book Space Relations, the reason why you set it off in space is so that you're not saying Harvard, you're not saying Oak Ridge National Laboratories, you're not saying Los Alamos, you're not saying Sandia National Laboratories, because that's treason. For your infiltration strategy, what you are saying is, we are going to be diplomats. The hero of our story is going to be a diplomat. We're training you to be a diplomat. You're in service of your country. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, and the book goes on. This is the book Donald Barr writes in 1974 about the time that Kissinger comes into the Nixon White House and kind of sidles up alongside of Dick Cheney and so forth. Remember Dick Cheney's dad, nuclear scout and so forth, energy executive. And I believe Kissinger moved the Holabird School that we've recently visited in Baltimore and moved it to Manhattan because he wants to get this technology to other places other than just Israel. Now, we'll go through a little bit later how Israel and Angleton kind of get very close in the 50s and 60s and how Israel gets the bomb. But we're going to talk today mostly about South Africa. After Israel got the bomb, the next thing was South Africa. And you have to, there's a lot of talk about Kennedy wanted to figure out what was going on in Dimona, what was going on in the Negev desert, what was going on with Ben Gurion out there, wanted to drill down on that. I'm not into the Mossad theory that they killed Kennedy over Kennedy putting pressure on that at all. That is about the time, though, that if you look at 1958 to 1964, that's when Barr is running these national science schools, this National Science Honors Program schools. Why is he doing that? Because it's a spy school. Why is he writing the book How and Why of Atomic Energy in 1964? He's trying to cast as wide a net as he can for the most talent possible to be sourced in the United States. And he sort of leaves the school in 1974. And I think Jeff Epstein's sort of the camel that breaks the back of Donald Barr. It's like these kids in America, they're stupid. We're not going to be able to support these kids. They want to go to the baseball game or whatever. Donald Barr had a lot of criticism of the American educational system, even though he was very involved in it. But the reason he writes an article about having to go service an old gay guy for a while, and then as part of the diplomatic duties, and then finding the queen in the remote kingdom, and then finding out what's under the castle. There's a secret under the castle. Is because you're using your youth and beauty to ply and bond with someone who's in a position of power, and then you're trying to find the resources. The secret under the castle is, where is the Shinkolobwe? If you're the person going to Congo, it's the Shinkolobwe. So the point I'm trying to make is the Russia working group that Fiona Hill is a part of, and this you've got Andrew Wood and Richard Dearlove and Downer and so forth. The kind of all these nuclear folks that are investing in nuclear and also oil and gas as well, because a lot of times you're going to explore for one, you may as well explore for the other one. And they trade, and you could trade in these as a currency as well between these. You're going to want to bring these people to the United States, bring them to U.S. universities. And if that's why there's so many American university professors on that Russia working group email, again, you'll have to go back to previous episodes to know what the original Annapolis group was. That was the Annapolis group. They later added some more universities, mainly the seven sister type universities, elite Ivy League type schools, but places that have training reactors. You don't want to send people to then go back and be the assistant of a nuclear scientist and train them in, falconry. You want to train them in nuclear science. That's why Donald Barr comes up with this STEM program. He was the first person who came up with it at Columbia. And then he's basically cookie cutting it and putting people in his place to go around. Now, I believe Jeff Epstein is the key guy who's bringing people into these different portals. There's a couple of different ways to get people in. You can bring them over the border. He had the place in New Mexico. You can bring them in on ships and yachts. He had the place down in West Palm Beach. You can keep them out on an island and just, do correspondence until they're needed for the party, or bring the professors to the island, which they did in Florida, or you can do the Russian retreats here in Maryland or up in New York, or go to Canada. So there's lots of different places to do the introductions, but at some point you're going to need to get a visa for the girl, a student visa. That's the best way to take the classes. Again, you see this in Beautiful Mind, where there's basically the infiltration of the professor is the beautiful girl, that infiltrates and then becomes the assistant, helper. And then, hey, when it's scholarship time, hey, why not? That's going to be my graduate assistant. And that's the idea here. And then eventually, when you get all the secrets that you need, then you go back to your country of origin. So that's where I think we are today. Now people are saying, well, what about, do do you have any proof of this, and where and what would this look like in the United States? Well, if you remember Karen Silkwood, a lot of, again, CIA does a good job of influencing directors in Hollywood to try to retell stories. This is the story with Meryl Streep, but Karen Silkwood was a union leader, no question about that. Everyone knows American Federation of Labor, AFL, very, very driven in terms of messaging by the CIA. She's saying, hey, we're all dying here of this plutonium. They're doing plutonium triggers there at that time in the 70s, in the early 70s, and she's dying of plutonium poisoning. Well, they make it about a victim's fund and so forth, and they try to get your mind off the fact that she said that there was plutonium triggers going missing, and that there was a theft ring inside the plant. This is the same thing that happens in Fernald in Cincinnati. It's the same story that happens with the nuclear triggers out in Rocky Flats. It's the same story at Hanford Nuclear Power Plant. And you basically bring in security people. We've talked about G4S with Wackenhut, with Wackenhut, Pakistan. You bring in Pakistanis that are supposedly have clearances. And if they want to develop a bomb in 1998, that's the year Bob Mueller brings in all the Pakistani spies, you give them clearances. And if they want a bomb, they will figure a way of getting the plutonium to Pakistan, believe me. And so on and so forth. And the one that Karen Silkwood talked about was this National Intelligence University, again, in West Palm Beach. Now, this is the one I think that Marc Rich put together with Bob Maxwell. Remember, Bob Maxwell is involved in all this, in getting the bomb to England and getting the bomb to France and getting the bomb to Germany. He's involved in all these deals. So anytime you see Bob Maxwell, and then by extension Ghislaine, his daughter, you have to think, hey, Jeff is not the brains of this outfit. It's Bob Maxwell. He's the interface, the super spy to OSS. Again, the Donald Barrs of the world, the Robert Swan Mueller, the seconds of the world, these OSS type people, the Molly McCauley's father, et cetera, the people that are down at the spy school in Hollenberg, right? So every time you see Robert Maxwell, think nuclear and think energy in general, but really metals is his thing, especially specialty metals that are strategic defense metals and technology. So there's a lot better chance. Now, this is my understanding of it. The targets here of the girls, if you will, again, I can only go by my personal experience, are not, they're rich diplomats. I mean, they're people who are visiting. They're Saudi diplomats or UAE diplomats, or they're people with a lot of money. And the other one, when they flew out to Long Island, a lot of them were university professors. They would invite people from Brown University, invite people from Harvard, Yale, Brookhaven National Laboratories. I can't remember the Crick and Watson lab out there with the genetics lab, not just nuclear, genetics as well, all the areas that are kind of cutting edge. Because you want to place, Norma is saying about the Iranians, we're at National Intelligence University in West Palm Beach there. Again, Fort Lauderdale Airport. So it gets established, I think, in 1971. Barr establishes the spy school in like 74. The three groups that Karen Silkwood said that were being used, or people that she thought were in the spy ring, were that she thought were in the spy ring were Brazil, Uruguay at that time, and then also Iran. So again, the fact that Jeff Epstein has a passport that says Khayyam and then it says Epstein, that just means that can be reused. He's going to get a new one every time he needs to go to a new place. Again, traveling in the Middle East, he's not going to want to say Jeff Epstein. You're going to want to say Khayyam Epstein and give him a little bit of makeup, and so that he doesn't get hijacked or or kidnapped when he's over there. So I just wanted to, and I see Connie talking about grooming the girls and everything, and I agree with that. The Miami Herald did the expose, but and Julie Brown. But I want to tell you, it's a slice. It's not the whole story. They're trying to make it look like Jeff Epstein has 40 different girlfriends, and that's not the case. It's not really the case. It's compromise. It's not about. Put it this way: it's way too big of a state-supported ring, and there's no. I mean, we have Acosta saying, the guy who supposedly gave the light sentence to him, he's intelligence. Lay off of him. So we know he's intelligence. Now we have to wonder: is he in the same line of intelligence as his father-in-law, the one whose daughter is there? Is his daughter in the same line of intelligence as the father? Nuclear? I'm not saying Ghislaine knows nuclear, but I'm saying Bob Maxwell sure does. And South Africa really, really wanted the bomb. Again, a very apartheid concept. And again, we have all these South Africans in our story that are part of all these nuclear negotiations. It's worth putting one of your South African diplomatic kids to Kennedy's cabinet in 1963 to negotiate the partial nuclear test ban treaty. That way, you know where all the testing is going to go on. You know all the movements. Remember, Wexner is in the same town as Sam Edlow. Before Mark Lambert goes to work for Sam Edlow, and before Rodney Fisk goes to work for Sam Edlow in Columbus, it's Sam Edlow. Okay, Sam Edlow, and remember, there's another Fisk, James Brown Fisk, that negotiates the partial nuclear test ban treaty. Now, doesn't it make sense if you are South Africa, you saw Israel get the bomb, they were threatened on 7 sides, right? Because they're overwhelmed and outnumbered. If you were South African, wouldn't you think the same thing? A lot of the same people that are in the story go from Israel to South Africa. So wouldn't you want a bomb for the same reason? Because you're outnumbered, basically. Wouldn't it make sense to put somebody in with Kennedy's partial nuclear test ban treaty, so you know where all the tests are going to be, and you know where all the weapons are to be inventoried, you know where all the plutonium is, and you know where to steal it, you know where everything's made. You basically are getting the whole playbook. This is why I go back to saying, don't you find it a little bit interesting that a South African is negotiating and writing the largest deal? Community bulletin boards, thank you very much. Tom McClintock lights a bag of poo. Yes, that was an interesting thing. Well, I don't think he lit a bag of poo. I'll go back to that. I think what Mueller's doing is they're trying to just. It's actually very great. It's great metadata, because what they're doing is going around, and the way Bob Mueller's mind works is, tell me all the evidence that could come out now. Now that the story's breaking, we got to cover it up. Tell me all the evidence that come out. Well, we got Jeff Epstein with the spy schools and flying the spy kids around. We know that Obama had 15 spies that were traded for our 3 Americans, right? You actually have the government of Iran go out and take the 3 Americans, right, so that we can get the spies back, right? So that's we know it's the spy kids. Okay, so we're going to do that case. Well, who's flying these people all over the place? What intermediary is flying all these students back and forth? What intermediary is flying all the equipment back and forth? Well, I think there's 2. Either the people that are installing all the Russian reactors in Iran and into all these 45 different reactors into these 6 different Sunni nations, that's the Russians, or it's going to be the Iranians, who are flying the diplomats back and forth, the kids back and forth as kids of diplomats. That's going to be Bijan Khan, and that's Altepkin, and they work for the Import-Export Bank. Export American secrets and import, or export American secrets to Iran and import American money to guarantee the building of all the infrastructure they need to do their nuclear program, and just keep moving. And once the country gets going with its base of reactors to achieve its goals, it's all of its research reactors, and a couple of reactors to do its nuclear ambitions, and a missile program. Remember, we have Bijan Khan talking about 3 different missile sites in Iran. Now, if he is just negotiating the Iran nuclear deal on the behalf of the United States, why is he talking about 3 different nuclear sites across the top shelf of Iran? We know he's intelligence. We know he's talking to the government, and he knows the locations. And he's the one saying that we're not going to, in this agreement, nuclear agreement, we're not going to tell you where the nuclear reactors are. Of course, they're going to put the nuclear reactors at secret sites and not tell you about it. And they're going to make the other sites public under mountains that you can't bomb, right? So again, if you just think of all these things together, it becomes very easy, because it's like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that's what the planes are for. That's what EA Aviation's doing. They're running drugs in one direction, and they're bringing their ambitions. What you want, drugs go out, but what do you want back? What do you want back? Do you want oil? No, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We're swimming in oil. Do you want gas? No, we're trying to sell the gas. Oh, okay. We need loans so that we build a pipeline and a yellow cake railroad. What we want is nuclear. If we have another revolution, right? And here we all are in Tehran, and we're in the little complex that we have. We don't control the oil anymore. We don't control the gas anymore. But if we have nuclear, we control that. That's what we want. As the mullahs, and if you're a mullah, you want the nuclear, right? I understand why the mullahs want the nuclear. I understand why the people don't care about it as much, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And if you think about it as a diplomatic bargaining chip, it makes a whole bunch of sense. Because if you are in this business, again, Donald Barr writes this book about going from place to place to place in an intergalactic universe, convincing people that they need to go away from labor-based system slavery to a better approach, nuclear, right? You need to find what the treasure is under the castle, right? You either have to be with the old guy, and if you're Jeff Epstein, a young Jeff Epstein, Donald Barr almost writes the book out of frustration, I think, after meeting Jeff Epstein, because here's a guy who I think he changes his tack. He says, wait a minute, I was trying to do the super kids up until now. I was trying to do the brainy kids with the science and honors program and so forth, and build them, from Manhattan. And these kids want to read comic books more than they want to study science. So maybe I'll just make comic books. So in 1964, when he leaves the Columbia, again, he starts the program, the Honor Society. He moves to comic books. And I think he moved to comic books because he said, look, I'm competing with television. I'm competing with Howdy Doody. I've got to do something. I'm competing now with color television. So he moves to the comic books. And I think he tries that for about 10 years and then realizes he leaves in frustration out of the school because it's not working. You know what? We're just going to bring people in. What we're missing is the motivating factor of nationalism, of people wanting to get the bomb for their own country. Imran Awan will do anything for AQ Khan when he comes here to get Pakistan the bomb, or continue supporting Pakistan's nuclear industry. The AQ Khan kids, right? Marc, Rich brings those AQ Khan kids in. In South Africa, in 71, when they bring the kids to Fort Lauderdale, it's called the National Intelligence Agency. It even sounds like the CIA. It's called the National Intelligence Agency. If you know anything about South Africa, that is the name of their National Intelligence Agency. These people are not making it difficult. What do you want to bet that Rodney Fisk came through the National Intelligence Agency, either in South Africa or in West Palm Beach, or both, If Donald Barr wanted to write a story about sex slavery, which is what Lee said, and I try to be very careful in saying, no, it's called compromise. These kids are very smart. They're very dedicated to their country. Like the Valerie Plame we talked about, we put that model out there early, and they want those resources, and they're willing to do anything to get those resources in terms of compromise, like being the professor's lovely assistant to get it. And that is going to end up being the story. And that's the story that I remember. That this whole thing about all these 14-year-olds being raped all the time isn't the right story. That there actually is a school on the island. They're bringing these kids up to be as smart as possible, but they're also very, very attractive as well. And they're bringing the best of the best. Now, was there a finder's pipeline for Jeff Epstein to Les Wexner for the Victoria's Secret girls? Yeah, the limited girls and all that. Yeah, there was that too. But I think the concentration was for national interest. Was for Israel's national interest to have the bomb. India against Pakistan, they felt like they had to have the bomb, and they would do anything. They'd put a program together to send as many kids to America as possible. Pakistan had that same problem. North Korea, obviously. Those people will do anything because they feel like, this South Korea with the United States could invade at any time. Libya. What you want is people who feel that there's no other choice. This is a national imperative because it doesn't pay to enrich uranium. You have to have a whole national effort to enrich uranium, just like it didn't pay when the United States did it. It didn't pay when Russia did it. But everyone has to think it's a national imperative. China. And then you steal the uranium once it's HEU. It's a genius thing. It's like waiting for somebody to, in the old days, in the Old West, you go pick all the gold, you go to the assayer's office, they bring it to the mill, they melt it all down. And then finally, when the guys are coming over going to market, that's when you jump them. And that's what's going on here. So I'm going to do questions for a little bit. And I'm getting the white phosphorus flashes again from the Navy building. Meet the sex slave who helped recruit underage girls. Yeah, and I think that's a little bit. I think Zero Hedge is a little bit off. I know they've quoted me quite a bit lately, but it's not just. I see William Janicki has the Freemasons, Monastery Church, Europe, Vatican Bank. Yeah, Jarosky. Yeah, if you look at the people that are involved here that are actually doing this, it much more supports an intelligence operation. The people that are the Nazi scientists that are coming out, the rocket scientists that are coming out, the avionics people that are coming out, the chemical weapons people that are coming out. Somebody had to get them out. They had to. Why would Angleton, who grew up in Milan, spoke perfect Italian. His father was a big businessman there with NCR in Milan, ran the resistance before the Allies got there, was doing all the planning. Wouldn't it make sense, as that OSS guy would reward Angleton, wouldn't it make sense that Dulles would reward him if he got all the top scientists out? That's Dulles' all of his investments. That's all of Sullivan and Cromwell's investments in Nazi Germany. If all those guys die and go to prison or go to Nuremberg, you lose all your investment. Wouldn't it make sense that he would reward Angleton with this program? Wouldn't it make sense that the Navy captain, the OSS officer that had this small patrol boat that you wouldn't really care that was going back and forth between Naples and Palermo, wouldn't it make sense that you would reward him with being the head of the FBI at some point, or his son at the head of the FBI? To me, that makes a lot of sense. And once you transport these people, just like Trevor Prouty, flying them around on airplanes, they become a real risk. They can, if we're ever going to go Nazi hunting, they become a real risk. Look at Trevor Prouty. Even one person, he's taking all these people around doing all these different secret negotiations. Where did they go? Well, Latin America, mostly Catholic. A lot of these people went as Knights of Malta under the cover of being priests. They went to these countries. They learned how to speak the Spanish or Portuguese. A lot of them went all over Europe. So yeah, I think the pedophile thing is a throw. And this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing with the Miami Herald, I think they let her see it like that, and they made it look like that. The dentist chair wasn't to rape and scopolamine all the girls. Now, if you want to go back to scopolamine and truth serum and truth drugs, the person who ran that operation at FBI or CIA, Frank Olson, and then also again Angleton was in charge of MK Ultra and Artichoke and Bluebird and all those programs for the truth serum. And again, they've made MK Ultra out to be this mind control sex thing, where it wasn't. It was, if the people, when they talked about it, Frank Olson and all this, they talked about truth serum. They were very concerned about brainwashing these pilots, getting down in North Korea and then giving up all the secrets and giving up all their plays. Okay, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to probably leave it right there. I just want to just think of it, if you had an exclusive. Let's say you had cars and there were no other cars in the world. This is around the time of Mercedes-Benz comes out with a car. Well, you could ship one car to every country in the world, and that would be very expensive cost of goods sold. Or you could develop, let's say, sell all the cars in one place, or you could be like Henry Ford and develop an assembly line, the idea of an assembly line. And then you could take that idea of an assembly line and go around the world as an ambassador and sell the system to other countries and have all their national banking invest in your system. That way you have an infrastructure for your cars. In the same way, I would do that for nuclear power. Once you create the infrastructure for nuclear power, if you're Joe Colvin, you're laughing all the way to the bank. BWXT sells fuel rods. I've got a market for my fuel rods and my HEU for the rest of my life. I don't want nuclear war. I want to sell the HEU fuel rods. So it's just that simple. But if you have to think about it, in order to get that, you have to get people, you have to go in and infiltrate into the country and get them to change their mindset that, hey, wait a minute, you're a small group of elites. There's a whole bunch of people that are trying to kill you right now, like what's going on in Puerto Rico, right? What you want is a portable growth, and you want excuse me, I'm getting the Navy lab, the Princeton Navy lab flashes again. But you want a portable wealth that is powered and not on the grid. You want all your military not on the grid. You want all your DHS, your national security, not on the grid. You want helicopters. You want Godfrey helicopters. You want, I can't remember, the Martin Bormann Bell planes for your security. That's why I keep calling it the diplomatic channel. Oh, you can't pay for it? Well, give us your oil, give us your natural gas, give us your uranium. Can't do that. If you're Turkey, give us your drugs. So John says, Mark, I think you're the best contact for the Historical Science Society. Oh, and all this is on Gibson Island. Oh, by the way, the person who wrote the biography that I'm reading, and I can't remember. Yeah. And I'm not saying there isn't perversion. I'm just saying I hate going there because people forget that it's compromise. You can go ahead and say that there's perversion in using 14-year-old girls with high cheekbones, and I agree with that. That's perverted. But if you lose the metadata, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't lose the metadata in that. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? To compromise. Who are they compromising? It's the whole who, what, when, where, how. And unfortunately, what happens, I see a lot, is just people go into mental lockdown. Pervert, pedophile. And it stops the mental faculties from thinking things through. Who are they trying? Is Bruce Orr's father, who I've read his scientific papers, he comes out of Oak Ridge with 1,200 scientific papers somehow on nuclear rod embrittlement. That sounds like nuclear power to me, right? That he's not the president of the New York Stock Exchange. Now, I'm not saying it didn't change with Kissinger. I'm not saying it didn't change with Kissinger to be more financial and move in that direction, because it did. Once you start using the intelligence agencies for private gain. I'm going to probably leave it right there. I wanted to talk about the Karen Silkwood thing, the National Intelligence Agency. For me, it's a dead giveaway. When somebody calls a school a national intelligence agency, they're trying to make it sound official, and it's a private agency. That's your tell right away. You'd have, that's for me is like sending up a flare. This is where to look. The National Intelligence University. Just start looking at who graduated from there, who came in and out of there. And again, we have Karen Silkwood saying 3 different countries. Again, we've talked about G4S, we talked about the Pulse nightclub shooter, we talked about Pakistan and so forth. Remember, Pakistan from 98 is the key proxy for everybody. AQ Khan, it's a proxy for Iran, proxy for Libya, proxy for North Korea. Scott Clotsworthy with his hand in the rocket, the Unha 3 rocket. The proxy for, well, I think India was the proxy at some point, or South Africa was the proxy for India. But that's why you don't need to change the Awans out every 5 years when you get a new country. You settle in on one. The reason why we couldn't use Iran anymore after 1979 is because they're our enemy. We can't have a whole bunch of Iranians with 1, 2, 3 Dropbox on Capitol Hill anymore. You could up until that point with Peter Strzok, but in 1979, now you have a problem. And I think that is the answer. So we'll leave it there. It's going to be an illusion. It's all a game of illusion. Okay. Let's see. Predictive programming, Hollywood movies. People talking about a lot of different things. Psychopaths need slumming. Link University. Oh, that is a good idea. Yeah. So Joseph Mifsud is another. The reason why I said Mallorca is because, and again, if you're going to have a strategy of developing out at some point, 168 different countries, you want to sell some kind of reactor to, you want to have some kind of diplomatic channel. Again, you're not trying to build democracy. You're trying to build partners, diplomatic partners. Again, that's Donald Barr's book. You have a guy like Mifsud flying all around the Mediterranean. That's going to be Mifsud's job, and he's cultivating these American universities all over the world. The reason why I say Mallorca is it's not a Sharjah is the university, the American university in UAE. So that would be the first place I would be looking for Jeff Epstein to be flying students out of. But the reason why I say Mallorca, that was the area. There was this group of people were in Vichy, France, and Montpellier. And this is just what I remember and from my visits. But there was this group in Montpellier, and they had people in Interpol and so forth, which just a little to the north of Lyon. The new big fusion reactor is going to be built near there. So it's that group, that nuclear group down there in Montpellier. But this, and then the mobsters on Sicily, and this was kind of an unholy alliance. These two, and they met on Mallorca. And so that's why I thought that Jeff Epstein, one of the stops was on Mallorca. And it was for Marc Ritz, certainly for, the weapons, drugs, things. I think that's moved now. Again, the Knights of Malta don't do it on their own island. It's kind of like you don't where you eat, right? And it's kind of moved over now to where the latest energy play is, which is the Leviathan oil field, the Genie Energy and the Leviathan oil field in Cyprus. And which makes sense because you want to be near where you're doing your oil and gas exploration. I don't know if Mallorca off the coast of Spain was at one point a big area where that was the last oil field and this is the new one, sort of like Glengarry, Glen Ross. I don't know. I haven't done enough research. But again, the big point I wanted to make here is don't go down the funnel for Jeff is the sex thing. I saw Lionel on one of the shows on RT saying about the same thing. The only thing that Lionel's convinced that no, this is a bigger thing. The only thing he doesn't do is the research. It's like, okay, this is going to be really big. Well, once you say that, you have to prove it. And you have to really get down to specifics on how it exactly happens and when the planes, exact movements and so forth. And that's the direction. That's what I love about our channel. Okay. Where I live in New England is a 6,000 parcel of land owned by Columbia. It was a summer school type for students training. Yeah. Well, you can tell me where in New England and I'll tell you nuclear power is the worst thing that ever happened to humanity. Okay. Well, it doesn't really matter what we think. It's the people in power and what they think. And the only way to stop the people in power is to break the backbone of the communications network. And I can prove that through computer simulation, right? Just by putting up any revolution, study any revolution in history, the way you break the back is break the communications network. You look at, I mean, an Enigma machine in World War II would be the easiest example. And all these guys, yes, and all these guys is, I see people say Genie Energy, connected with Genie Energy. Yes. Resources for the Future, Seth Rich, Marc Rich, the whole crew is the same. Rupert Murdoch. Yes, you're going to have to throw in a Rothschild children. I can't say the word child. You have to throw in the Rothschild occasionally. You got to throw in Bill. What's his name? Bill from the Energy Secretary. Bill Richardson. You got to throw him in there. Litchfield County, Connecticut. Richardson. Okay. Well, I don't remember. I know Angleton is an interesting character, and he did something good for Allen Dulles, which I think has got the nuclear Nazis out. But it could have been the aviation Nazis, could have been the missile Nazis, could have been all of the above, could have been the chemical weapons Nazis, could have been the whatever germ warfare Nazis. Cambridge University, London. Well, the Cambridge Five, which was Kim Philby and Burgess. Remember, we have a Burgess running our Defense Intelligence Agency here in the United States up until Mike Flynn takes over the agency. I just thought that was interesting. And the kid who gets killed at the gates, shot at the gates of the White House, or else he shot himself twice through a cell phone to commit suicide, is also named Burgess. And that was also at Florida International University, or Florida State University. The interesting thing is I talked to somebody whose father worked with Edward Teller. And Edward Teller would go to these summer consortiums with all these other scientists. He's the father of the H-bomb, supposedly. And it was down in this area. And it was with these JSON scientists. And they would all sit around and collaborate and write up things on the chalkboard and convince each other, what the next thing was. Well, if you're Mossad or whatever, and remember, Mossad, Izzy and all the Mossad guys are best buds in the early 50s with Angleton. You just record everything. Again, you're going to need spies. You need spy girls to come in or spy guys or whatever to get the parts and stuff like that. But that's how I think the H-bomb got it exfiltrated. So we'll leave it there. Let's see, why haven't you already broken the communications networks? Well, I did. I found the hard drives, and I found the Blackberries. Don't you find it a little bit? I mean, if you want me to crack the code, I have to have the devices. I mean, if you want me to try to, that's usually something the NSA does with some very big computers. I'm not saying I'm a decryptor, but I think finding the evidence is a pretty big deal. Remember, the guy who was up with to show you how important this is to Mueller, and he doesn't know if Zebley is. You can see how high the level of discomfort goes with Mueller. The reason he has Zebley, I will just say this is Zebley. There yesterday. I'm pretty sure Zebley's the one who smashed the Blackberries. What if Zebley didn't smash the Blackberries, all of them? Maybe he kept one out, right? So that's why Mueller wants to push him forward and make sure that he testifies also, so that he's going to go down if he's the mole. Nobody knows where the mole is yet. We know that who did the Blackberries. We know who configured the Blackberries. I'm sitting here explaining the whole situation, so I'm doing as much as I can. But I did not ever at any time have physical access to Imran's Blackberries. I only had one Blackberry for about 8 hours. That was probably configured by Imran. And we figured it out. It was a Navy intel guy named Gardner. And his brother, Gardner, is doing the network in the congressional Rayburn, not the Rayburn office building. It's been a while since I've been in DC. I can't remember which office building it was, but his consulting company is named after that office building. That's where the servers were. So, I mean, other than shining a light and saying, look here, NSA, I don't know what else to say. Somebody had to be out. There had to be, and just by saying this, some NCIS agents had to be out there at the Hawks Head location. Taggart didn't make that up. Tanae Taggart is a Navy cryptologist. No matter how now we can call her a doctor later on and a Navy corpsman later on. I know she's a Navy cryptologist. Taggart did testify to Pride hard drives. We know those are the hard drives from the server. We know it's the 123 Dropbox. We know Pakistan is the key exfiltrator of the nuclear technology. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't drugs and weapons that go along with this, because you open up a diplomatic channel, a secret channel, they're going to ship a lot of things, airplane parts and helicopter parts, and who knows all what, chemical weapons, everything. You open up a channel. But, I think I got pretty far down the track. The reason why I say that is, if Trump knows that, if Scavino knows that, if the different people in the Trump campaign come back with that, now that they're saying, hey, Trump may have lied during his interview, this is how you fight back. You fight back with saying, well, did I lie about the Pakistani guy? Did I lie about the Blackberries getting busted? What happened to the Blackberries out at Imran Awan's house? He's the one who had the server passwords, not me. He's the one who we have stories in popular press about handing thumb drives off in front of the Wrigley building in Chicago to Pac ISI guys, to Imran's father. Luke wrote about that. So, what are you looking at me for? Did you want to ask me about that? Ask me anything you want about that. Trump needs to turn it around back on the DNC, right? And Mueller. It's bigger than the DNC now. It's Mueller. It's the U.S. intel community doing a kind of trying to do an impeachment coup now. And you can see how thin the threads are here. And they're still going ahead with it because they are rattled. They don't know where the leak is. So anyway, ligature marks around. Well, I think they want to make it seem like Jeff is not state sponsored. I think the reason why they put they let Julie Brown just see a slice, and they didn't, for instance, they didn't tell Julie Brown that they were bringing out all these scientists out to the island. Julie Brown is the Miami Herald reporter. They didn't tell her that they were bringing out David Hawking. They didn't tell her that they were promising eternal life, or this kind of wacky program that Eric Braverman had with Fergie. They had a life extension course or program that they were going to put these people on. They've never mentioned that. They wanted to make it look like, oh, this is the sex thing, right? They said, well, we're going to have one of the girls, Victoria, pose with Andy, and we'll sensationalize this. Now, if you saw the photograph and you're Julie Brown, you think, hey, wow, this is sensational. But it's a throw. It's a throw from what really is going on. The MI6 makes a lot of money selling nuclear fuel rods, along with the Joe Colvin and the other folks here in Annapolis. The Annapolis group makes a lot more money, and they don't want that business to go away. And the reason why you would have Jeff Epstein getting beat up and in the fetal position and all this stuff is you don't want him to appear state sponsored. He already got the sentence of a lifetime, right? For 13 months reading the Wall Street Journal, 12 hours a day. They're trying to get away from that. They're trying to build the suicide narrative like he's not state sponsored. He's state sponsored. The thing about a pilot is you don't want to ever get rid of them. They can keep flying until the day they die. I mean, into their 70s. They're still valuable. You don't want to burn Jeff Epstein. You want to say, oh, he's going to turn in so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and we're going to give him substantial assistance because you want him flying that plane. This nuclear business is not going to stop just because I'm talking about it. They're going to keep going with it unless Trump talks about Imran Awan. That's just, if you don't break the back, I don't know how else to say it. If you don't say, look, this spy ring supported AQ Khan to exfiltrate this nuclear business in the 123 Dropbox. If you don't do that, then don't expect this to end. You have to break the back of the network and know who, when, how, and why, and what the network is for. If you think it's something generic, like just sex trafficking, you're not going to solve the puzzle. It's like getting one side of the Rubik's Cube right. That's good. That's part of it. But the other 5 sides is what you need to solve the puzzle. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate all you tuning in.